if, in the course of your research, you've done any work on Margaret Sanger, the eugenics movement, and its ties to the Democratic Party in the 1920s and 30s, and then the sort of progression of Democratic support for Planned Parenthood today, and Planned Parenthood being prevalent in minority neighborhoods in the United States today.
Right, so now here you go, putting your finger on another very explosive grenade. It's totally in our movie, and I'm writing about it now, but I didn't even mention it today. I wasn't even going to go there. But progressivism, modern progressivism, has actually had two very interesting phases. And the second phase has had to do major cleanup of the first phase. Because progressivism emerged in the early 20th century, and it was closely connected, not exclusively, but closely connected with eugenics and social Darwinism. And the basic idea is that there are all these useless people in our society, and the best thing to do with them is to prevent them from existing in the first place. And so Margaret Sanger, people say, well, Margaret Sanger is a champion of birth control. You know, Hillary says that she got the Margaret Sanger Award a couple years ago. Margaret Sanger is a champion of birth control about limiting your reproduction. Actually, no. Margaret Sanger was not for limiting your reproduction. Margaret Sanger was for fit people having more kids and unfit people having fewer kids. In other words, some people should limit their reproduction, not all. By the way, the Nazis had the same view. The Nazi eugenics was based upon the idea that the Nordic Germans should have as many kids as possible and all kinds of subsidies to have more kids. Meanwhile, people who are gypsies and people who are immigrants and people who are mentally defective and people who are unfit, we have to wipe out their progeny. So when Margaret Sanger set up her so-called Negro Project, she'd hire all these black ministers, she'd pay them money to go in the black community. Today the progressives go, well, isn't this just wonderful? She's basically teaching people to space out their pregnancies. So what's going on here is there's a whole effort to take Margaret Sanger, erase the real Margaret Sanger, and put up this fake Margaret Sanger who can be an object of our common adulation. Now, the reason that all of this matters, I think, is there is a tendency in history when things turn out badly, to go back and clean it up. So for example, in the 1930s, there was enormous admiration for Mussolini and a fair amount of admiration for Hitler. The young John F. Kennedy went to Germany in the 1930s, and he says, Hitler is a legend. He goes, Hitler's great. He goes, the truth of it is most people misunderstand Hitler, and the people who condemn the Nazis are just jealous of them. This is JFK. Then Mussolini was the favorite of FDR. FDR says, I really like Mussolini. I'm studying that man, and FDR dispatches a whole bunch of his New Dealers to Italy to study fascism. Because he goes, we aren't there yet. We need to learn from the fascists. Now you might think this is like one-way admiration, but no, Mussolini reviews FDR's book in an Italian journal, and Mussolini says, it's great, this guy's one of us, he's a fascist. Now, this is in the record of the 1930s. But after World War II, suddenly fascism becomes identified with Nazism and the whole. Now, in fairness, fascism in its origins had nothing to do with the Holocaust. But after the war, it does. It has that aroma of the gas chambers. So the progressive scholars move in, cleanup time, we got to go back and wipe clean the record. And so you have all these textbooks now. Not a mention. You think that if you, this is all incendiary, fascinating information, but it should be in our history books. You have to really look. Now, everything I'm saying, I want to be really clear, is there's not any element of controversy. I'm not making claims that are disputed by, I'm saying what actually is true. I'm simply saying it's sanitized, it's whitewashed, because this is real history. This is the actual record we'd have to contend with. And we'd have to be a little bit more careful in the things we say today if we were to be fair about it. So this is intellectual fairness and intellectual diversity. So you mentioned Sanger, and I just wanted to give you a dose of where I'm going with all this, and there'll be a lot more coming in the movie.